Muammar Gaddafi, the name itself, evokes a myriad of emotions. Born in a Bedouin tent in 1942, Gaddafi's rise to power was as dramatic as his rule. From a young age he was deeply influenced by the anti-colonial sentiments sweeping across Africa and the Middle East. He was a man of contradictions, a revolutionary leader who ruled Libya with an iron fist for over 4 decades. Gaddafi seized power in a bloodless coup in 1969, overthrowing King Idris and establishing the Libyan Arab Republic. To the west, he was a dictator, a sponsor of terrorism, a pariah on the world stage. His support for various militant groups and his involvement in international incidents, such as the Lockerbie bombing, cemented his reputation as a global menace. To his supporters, he was a visionary, a champion of the oppressed, a modern-day Omar Mukhtar. Gaddafi's Green Book, which outlined his political philosophy, was seen by many as a blueprint for a new form of governance. His legacy remains shrouded in controversy, his achievements overshadowed by his brutal methods. While he invested heavily in social programs, his regime was also marked by severe human rights abuses. Gaddafi's Libya was a complex tapestry woven with threads of progress and repression. Under his rule, Libya saw significant advancements in infrastructure, healthcare, and education. He spearheaded remarkable social and economic reforms, transforming Libya from a poverty-stricken nation into a prosperous state. His ambitious projects included the Great Man-Made River, which aimed to provide fresh water to arid regions. Education and healthcare became free and accessible, while infrastructure projects flourished, bringing modernity to even the most remote corners of the country. These achievements, however, were often overshadowed by his oppressive tactics. However, this progress came at a cost. Gaddafi's regime was notorious for its authoritarianism, with widespread reports of torture, extrajudicial killings, and suppression of political dissent. Gaddafi's regime was characterized by authoritarianism, human rights abuses, and a brutal crackdown on any form of dissent. His secret police and intelligence agencies maintained a tight grip on the population, ensuring that any opposition was swiftly dealt with. His eccentric personality and flamboyant style only added to his enigmatic persona, making him a figure of fascination and fear in equal measure. Gaddafi's elaborate attire and grandiose titles such as Brother Leader and King of Kings further cemented his unique image. This essay delves into the life and legacy of Muammar Gaddafi, exploring his rise to power, his vision for Libya, and the reasons behind his downfall. Through a detailed examination, we aim to understand the complexities of a leader who left an indelible mark on the history of Libya and the world. Gaddafi's journey to power began in the sands of Sirte, Libya, where he was born into a Bedouin family in 1942. His early years were spent in the harsh desert environment, where he learned the values of resilience and self-reliance from his nomadic upbringing. The Bedouin lifestyle, characterized by its simplicity and connection to the land, deeply influenced Gaddafi's worldview and his later political ideology. Growing up amidst the poverty and inequality of colonial Libya, young Gaddafi developed a strong sense of Arab nationalism and a deep resentment towards foreign influence. The sight of his fellow Libyans living in squalor while foreign powers exploited the country's resources fueled his desire for change. He was particularly affected by the stark contrast between the wealth of the colonial rulers and the destitution of the local population. His worldview was further shaped by the writings of Gamal Abdel Nasser, the charismatic Egyptian leader who advocated for Arab unity and socialism. Nasser's vision of a united Arab world, free from Western domination, resonated deeply with Gaddafi. He avidly followed Nasser's speeches and writings, which inspired him to dream of a similar revolution in Libya. Inspired by Nasser's pan-Arabist ideals, Gaddafi joined the Libyan army, seeing it as a vehicle for change. He believed that the military could be a powerful force for national liberation and social transformation. During his time in the army, Gaddafi formed a clandestine group of like-minded officers who shared his vision of overthrowing the monarchy and establishing a new political order. In 1969, at the age of 27, he led a bloodless coup d'état that toppled the pro-Western monarchy of King Idris. The coup was meticulously planned and executed with precision, catching the monarchy and its supporters off guard. Gaddafi's rise to power was swift and decisive, marking a turning point in Libya's history. This event, which came to be known as the Al-Fateh Revolution or the Green Revolution, marked the beginning of Gaddafi's 4-decade rule over Libya. The revolution was celebrated by many Libyans who saw it as the dawn of a new era of independence and prosperity. Gaddafi's promises of social justice, economic reform, and national sovereignty resonated with the masses. Gaddafi's vision for Libya was ambitious and radical. He sought to break away from the colonial past and create a new society based on his unique blend of Islamic socialism and Arab nationalism. His speeches were filled with fervor and conviction, as he outlined his plans for transforming Libya into a model of revolutionary governance. He sought to create a new society based on Islamic socialism, social justice, and Arab unity. Gaddafi envisioned a Libya where wealth was distributed equitably and every citizen had a stake in the nation's prosperity. He aimed to unite the Arab world under a common cause, believing that only through unity could the region achieve true independence and progress. He envisioned a Libya free from foreign domination, where the country's oil wealth would be used to uplift the lives of all its citizens. Gaddafi's policies focused on nationalizing the oil industry and using the revenues to fund social programs, infrastructure projects, and education. He believed that Libya's natural resources should benefit its people, not foreign corporations. Upon seizing power, Gaddafi moved swiftly to implement his vision. He wasted no time in consolidating his authority and setting the stage for his ambitious reforms. His early years in power were marked by a flurry of activity as he sought to reshape Libya's political, economic, and social landscape. He nationalized foreign oil companies, expelled American and British military bases, and closed down Western cultural institutions. These actions were part of his broader strategy to assert Libya's sovereignty and reduce foreign influence. Gaddafi's bold moves earned him both admiration and enmity as he challenged the established order and sought to redefine Libya's place in the world. He introduced a new political system known as the Jamahiriya, or State of the Masses, which he claimed was a form of direct democracy. This system was designed to empower ordinary Libyans by giving them a direct say in the governance of their country. Gaddafi's Jamahiriya was a radical departure from traditional forms of government, reflecting his belief in the revolutionary potential of the masses. Gaddafi's socialist policies, fueled by Libya's vast oil wealth, led to significant improvements in the living standards of ordinary Libyans. Education and healthcare were made free and accessible to all, and literacy rates soared. Gaddafi invested heavily in infrastructure projects, building roads, hospitals, schools, and housing complexes across the country. One of Gaddafi's most ambitious projects was the Great Man-Made River, a massive underground network of pipes that transported water from ancient aquifers in the Sahara Desert to the coastal cities. This ambitious project, hailed as the eighth wonder of the world, transformed Libya's agricultural landscape and provided a vital source of water for its growing population. Gaddafi also implemented social reforms aimed at improving the lives of women. He encouraged women's education and employment, granted them the right to divorce and property ownership, and established a special military unit composed entirely of women. These reforms, coupled with Libya's newfound oil wealth, led to a period of unprecedented prosperity. Libya, once one of the poorest countries in the world, boasted the highest human development index in Africa under Gaddafi's rule. Section 4. A Voice for Africa, Gaddafi's Pan-African Dream. Gaddafi's ambitions extended far beyond the borders of Libya. He envisioned a future where Africa could rise as a formidable force on the global stage, free from the shackles of foreign domination. A staunch advocate of Pan-Africanism, he envisioned a united and powerful Africa that could stand up to Western imperialism and neo-colonialism. His dream was to see African nations working together in harmony, leveraging their collective strength to achieve true independence and prosperity. He saw himself as a leader of the African continent, a modern-day Kwame Nkrumah who could unite its disparate nations under a single banner. Gaddafi believed that by fostering unity, Africa could overcome its colonial past and build a brighter future for its people. Throughout his rule, Gaddafi was a vocal critic of Western foreign policy in Africa, denouncing what he saw as their exploitation and neo-colonial practices. He often spoke out against the economic and political interference of Western powers, advocating for African self-reliance and sovereignty. He provided financial and military support to liberation movements across the continent, from Nelson Mandela's African National Congress in South Africa. Gaddafi's support was instrumental in the fight against apartheid, earning him the respect and admiration of many African leaders, to Charles Taylor's National Patriotic Front of Liberia. His involvement in these movements was a testament to his commitment to the cause of African liberation and unity. Gaddafi's Pan-African vision extended to the economic sphere as well. He believed that economic integration was key to Africa's development and prosperity. He proposed the creation of a single African currency, which he believed would facilitate trade and economic cooperation among African nations, a common African defense force, and a Pan-African parliament. These institutions, he argued, would provide the necessary framework for political and economic stability across the continent. He also invested heavily in infrastructure projects across the continent, funding roads, railways, and telecommunications networks. These projects were aimed at improving connectivity and fostering economic growth in Africa. While Gaddafi's efforts to unite Africa under his leadership ultimately proved unsuccessful, his vision and ideas left a lasting impact on the continent. His Pan-African vision resonated with many across the continent. His message of unity and resistance against foreign domination struck a chord with people who had long felt marginalized and oppressed. He was seen as a champion of the downtrodden, a voice for the voiceless, and a symbol of resistance against Western hegemony. Gaddafi's legacy as a Pan-Africanist continues to inspire those who dream of a united and prosperous Africa. Section 5. The West and the Mad Dog Seeds of Discord. Despite his social and economic achievements, Gaddafi's regime remained a pariah in the eyes of the West. His support for liberation movements, his anti-Western rhetoric, and his alleged involvement in terrorist attacks made him a target of Western hostility and sanctions. The United States in particular viewed Gaddafi's Libya as a state sponsor of terrorism. The Reagan administration accused Gaddafi of orchestrating the bombing of a Berlin discotheque in 1986 that killed a U.S. soldier. In retaliation, the U.S. launched airstrikes on Tripoli and Benghazi, targeting Gaddafi's personal compound. Gaddafi's relationship with the West thawed somewhat in the early 2000s. Following the 9/11 attacks, he condemned terrorism and cooperated with the United States in its war on terror. He also renounced his pursuit of weapons of mass destruction and opened up Libya's economy to foreign investment. However, this rapprochement proved short-lived. Gaddafi's continued authoritarian rule, his crackdown on dissent, and his increasingly erratic behavior continued to draw the ire of Western governments and human rights organizations.
The death of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011 marked a significant turning point for Libya. His regime, which had lasted for over 4 decades, came to a dramatic end. The country plunged into chaos. Civil war erupted, tearing the nation apart. Various factions vied for power, leading to widespread violence and instability. Years of fighting destroyed Libya's infrastructure and economy. Cities were reduced to rubble, and essential services became scarce. The country, once prosperous under Gaddafi's rule, faced economic collapse. Factories shut down, markets emptied, and unemployment soared. The collapse of law and order created fertile ground for human trafficking. Smugglers and criminal networks thrived in the power vacuum. Desperate migrants seeking escape from poverty and conflict became easy prey for traffickers. Many hoped to find a better life in Europe. Libya became a hub for human trafficking networks, exploiting vulnerable people trying to reach Europe. The journey was perilous, and many did not survive. The humanitarian crisis deepened as thousands of migrants were subjected to horrific conditions, torture and abuse. International organizations struggled to provide aid amidst the ongoing conflict. Muammar Gaddafi, the enigmatic leader of Libya for over 4 decades, was a controversial figure. Known for his flamboyant style and revolutionary rhetoric, he left an indelible mark on African politics. He was a staunch advocate for a united Africa, tirelessly working to bring together the continent's diverse nations under a single banner. Gaddafi believed in a Pan-African vision, a continent free from Western influence and interference. He envisioned a self-reliant Africa capable of solving its own problems and thriving independently. He dreamed of a strong and prosperous Africa, capable of charting its own destiny. His vision included economic development, political stability, and social progress for all African nations. Gaddafi used Libya's oil wealth to support African nations. He believed that by sharing resources, African countries could achieve greater collective strength and independence. He provided financial aid, invested in infrastructure projects, and championed African unity on the global stage. His contributions included building roads, schools, and hospitals across the continent. His efforts, though often met with skepticism, highlighted his commitment to seeing Africa rise as a powerful force. Despite the controversies, Gaddafi's legacy in promoting African unity and development remains significant. Gaddafi's methods, however, were often brutal and authoritarian. He ruled Libya with an iron fist, suppressing dissent and opposition. His regime was accused of human rights abuses and corruption. Critics argued that his Pan-African vision was a smokescreen for his own ambitions and desire for power. Despite his controversial methods, Gaddafi's rule saw significant improvements in the lives of many Libyans. Literacy rates soared, healthcare improved, and access to education expanded. Gaddafi's social programs, funded by oil revenue, elevated Libya's standard of living, making it one of the most prosperous nations in Africa. Section 4. Villain or Visionary. Gaddafi's complex legacy. Gaddafi's legacy remains a subject of debate. His rule, spanning over 4 decades, left an indelible mark on Libya and the world. Was he a ruthless dictator who used violence and fear to maintain power? His regime was marked by human rights abuses and suppression of dissent, or was he a visionary leader who genuinely sought to improve the lives of his people and unite Africa? He invested in infrastructure and social programs. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. His policies brought both progress and pain. Gaddafi was a complex figure, capable of both brutality and benevolence. His international relations were equally paradoxical. He was a product of his time, shaped by the political realities of post-colonial Africa. His vision for a united Africa was both ambitious and controversial. His story is a reminder that leadership is rarely black and white, often existing in shades of grey, and even those with noble intentions can make grave mistakes. Gaddafi's legacy is a testament to the complexities of power and governance. Section 5. Reclaiming the Dream, a Hopeful Future for Africa. As Libya struggles to rebuild after years of turmoil, the dream of a united and prosperous Africa remains elusive. The challenges are immense: poverty, conflict, corruption, but so is the potential. Perhaps Gaddafi's vision, flawed as it may have been, can serve as a starting point, a reminder that Africa's destiny lies in its own hands. The continent must find its own path to unity and prosperity, one built on democracy, justice, and equality.